We've experienced pretty much everything that there is to offer in Xenoverse 2, so we're going to break down everything the game has to offer, including the bad, so you can decide if it's worth getting. First and foremost, I feel like I should mention the fact that this game is not solely a fighting game. It's more of an RPG, where you level up your character and unlock abilities, though there is a game mode where all of that doesn't matter, but you still need to play the game's story and all of its offerings to really unlock anything. So with that being said, how does this game stack up to the first game? Well, I can put this as bluntly as possible. Xenoverse 2 makes Xenoverse 1 feel obsolete by comparison. Mostly everything has either been improved or refined, making the experience similar, but better. It is a double-edged sword though, and not everyone will like that a majority of the content from the game is reused from the first one. But with all that out of the way, let's talk about the graphics. The visual style in Xenoverse has received a good update to it. The modular design of the characters allows for a lot of assets to be reused in this, but a lot have been adapted to the new style. Or, well, to the updated look, because it doesn't look that different, it just looks better. Everything seems to be more vibrant and glowy in this game, especially with the brightness setting turned all the way up, giving it more contrast. Though the quality of textures can be pretty spotty in some areas, and since this is an anime look, you shouldn't be expecting any major detail. The characters though do look as they should, with plenty of accuracy to their different outfits. Your customized character also has a good variety of options to look different, but still feel like a part of the world. They're not exactly going to be able to look that different compared to other players. The attacks are pretty much the same as what I mentioned previously, the same animation, same effect, but just updated and made to look better, just like with some of the clothes. Some attacks have gotten different effects altogether sometimes, and others just downright look cool. Though, other than your character yelling the attack, there's not much to distinguish each attack apart, and there's about 10 different Kamehamehas, so it all kind of starts to look the same, unless you're using other non-beam-like attacks, like the Spirit Bomb and others such, while other attacks are just not as easy to see, but they're easy to dodge anyway, so I feel like it kind of balances it out. Next, let's talk about the world. So you're in Canton City, the home of the Time Patrollers, a much bigger city than Toki City from the first game, and still acts like a hub world for the players. Though it's not 3 different areas all separated by loading screen this time, it's an entire map with various districts that all have their different themes to it. It's really big, as well as has a lot of NPCs littered throughout the entire place, meaning that you will be visiting every little place on the map every now and then. The map never feels too small or too big, and once you unlock the license to fly, you find out that you can literally go anywhere. It's interesting to fly around and see what other players are doing, though the most likely thing you'll see is them standing around and interacting with something, or this. Yeah! Oh my god, this is fucking insane. Come on, you know you want to be a part of this? If you play offline though, it won't be long before the city starts to feel pretty empty. All NPCs do is stand in the same spot, loop animations in the same spot, or just fly in circles around the same spot. Without people running around through the main streets, it starts to feel pretty boring after a while, and the need to explore just disappears. Sure, you can search for drops, but after you do it a few times, you'll eventually ignore it all together, since you can just buy stuff. There are several locations you can visit from the Dragon Ball world that give you special benefits though, and they all have different uses. Hercule can give you special missions, and you can also do missions for Great Saiyaman. You get a ton of Zenny from doing these. At Capsule Corp you can train with Vegeta and use a machine that Bulma has to take your unwanted gear and turn the stats that they have into an item that you can equip, which possibly has even better stats, and that's called a QQ Bang. At Namek you can help a Namekian grow crops or help Nail defend the Namekian Dragon Balls in exchange for getting access to be able to meet Guru and unlock your potential. At Majin Buu's house you can help him start a family, and each kid can be sent out for items, and depending on their color will bring you specific items. And finally there's Frieza's ship, which you can enlist in Frieza's army and climb its ranks. So despite how lonely it can get when playing solo, the hub world is in no doubt an improvement from the first game. Next, let's cover progression, essentially how you obtain items or level up. The most obvious in this case is the story of the game. A good set of missions that take you through pretty much the entire Dragon Ball Z story that we have now, not counting Super. The missions have their share of difficulty, but if you're used to fighting, you'll find this very easy to beat at first. It's once you reach Namek is that you'll find that you might get your metaphorical salad toss. The mission mostly give experience though, so you're not going to be progressing that much. But we will talk about the story a little down the line. There are other ways to level up though. You have training missions, parallel quests, expert missions, and even raids. The trainers in the city are all over the map in comparison to the first game where only one would spawn at a time and they were in random locations. Here they all have fixed positions and they give you all the moves related to that specific character. So all Vegeta related moves you're gonna find them from Vegeta, obviously. So there are tons of characters, both heroes and villains, and you can basically go whenever you want and train with them. Though you are technically restricted by your training rank, but whatever rank you are at, those characters will be unlocked and you can do whatever you want to train with them or not, whatever you feel like doing. The only thing limiting you is training rank, which can be leveled up by just doing missions anyway. So it's a good balance that they have here. In parallel quests though, which there are about 100 of them, there are missions that can be done with up to 3 players, and it's where you're going to get a majority of your XP and gear from. You don't have to play as your custom character when you're doing them either. The thing is, a majority of these quests are recycled from the first game. Sure, some things are different here and there, maybe a different character to fight or a person to talk to, but overall a majority of the quests were in the first game. And worst of all, these missions can be pretty repetitive since the majority of them are just defeating enemies over and over. There's not much variety or challenge unless you're under leveled. Missions only get really challenging when you need to defeat a ton of enemies really quickly, and even then it's only because you have a time limit or they have ridiculous amounts of health. It's not because the fight itself is hard, it's just that everything is just stacked against you. The variety in missions goes as follows though. There's regular fighting where you have to fight a bunch of enemies given to you. Maybe sometimes you have to defeat a certain one for something to happen, like maybe defeat Krillin first so Goku could go Super Saiyan. One where you have to defeat a certain number of enemies, Dragon Ball collecting, and Grade 8 fights. Each parallel quest has an ultimate finish, which means a certain list of side objectives which need to be completed in order for another fight to happen, which can be related to the story, it can be a what-if scenario. You know, there's a ton of ways that parallel quests can go. But overall, after completing pretty much all of them and seeing that there's not that much variety, I really wanted to get them over with so badly. Why? Because I can say that expert missions and raids are easily the best part of the game. Expert missions are missions that you can do with up to 6 players, and it's where a lot of the challenge and probably frustration will lie for most people. The rewards are kind of underwhelming at best when it comes to getting skills, but in terms of XP, they're really good. Though by then, you should be the max level for the game anyway, but regardless, expert missions are tough. Some of them are easier than others, some of them require more players, some of them require not that much. It's kind of inconsistent, the difficulty of it, but overall the raids are much more challenging than parallel quests. As for raids, well, we only played one raid and it was in the beta, but we don't know if all raids will be like this. But for the one we played, you fight an enemy that has ridiculous amounts of health, like ridiculous amounts of health. But raids are a server-wide event though, so it's a community effort to defeat them. You go into a mission and you have 5 minutes to do as much damage as possible to one single enemy, and you keep repeating it until he finally dies. Finally, the enemies of the Dragon Ball universe finally feel powerful and tough to beat, though some of them can be bounced around pretty easily. Next, let's cover efficiency. How good does the game run? And the type of issues that it has. So despite all the things I said I liked about the game, there's a lot of problems surrounding online play. Missions done in co-op have a tendency to not count for other players, but it will count for the host though. That means that when you play with friends, you will have to complete the same mission around 3 to 6 times, with each time having to exit the game, have another person host it, and repeat the same thing over and over a few times. You can't swap hosts in the lobby. You have to leave and rehost it manually. There's no other way around it, and it gets really annoying because you have to finish missions and complete them to unlock the next one, and if no one that's completed the mission can have the next mission, then you're inevitably gonna have to repeat it again when they have to do it anyway. This bug is so bad that it can force players to solo the game completely. It makes playing with friends an absolute chore, especially in expert missions since how hard they can be sometimes where you essentially need players to help you. Though I should mention that a recent patch has tried to fix some of the issues, but we don't know the extent and how much it actually did, so we're just showing you based on what we played up until the patch that happened recently. Now we can finally talk about the gameplay. The fighting in this game can get really intense, especially when you're fighting with a friend. It has the speed and energy that you would associate with Dragon Ball Z, and it makes it so much more enjoyable to just hit people with a super god fist. However, if you're the type of player that has pretty bad internet, then playing against other players might not be as enjoyable to play. The hit detection can be pretty spotty, however the AI is improved from the first game in terms of them as opponents, but as allies for parallel quests they're still kinda useless. As enemies, they become tougher to fight depending on how strong the character you pick is. So Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta might be tougher to fight than Krillin, so it's definitely more enjoyable to fight the AI this time around. Fighting against players though is a little bit more complicated. There's two modes for fighting, limits or no limits. Limits means that all skill points and items you have on your character have an effect, while no limits is the opposite and your character builds and all those other things have not as much of a significant impact, and skill is more of a main focus. There's definitely more strategy involved in fighting other players this time around. Sure, there's not as much spamming as there was before, but it's still there. Despite no limits being the most balanced though, Z-Souls and the customized skill sets still make builds a hassle to deal with, and custom characters are just simply not as balanced as the actual DBZ cast of characters. However, climbing the rankings of rank play could be enticing for some people, because like I said, the fights do get really intense. But I have to say again, if you lag, be warned, because it might not be the most fun experience. At first glance, those who are perceptive can tell you that the game has improved vastly from the previous gameplay of Xenoverse 1. Yeah, this was one of the most things it needed to improve on, and now the game is much better for it. They added snap vanishing that doesn't take stamina, and they also improved on the stamina break feature, making it easier for you to string combos together, like was shown earlier. There's also this new dashing mechanic called the burst dash, where you can instantly charge into an escaping enemy, or if they're using an ultimate, you can burst dash behind them and break their stamina. They've also improved on each character's combos, making it feel slightly different of an experience. The gameplay can carry itself well with the expert missions, however, expert missions mainly favor range fighters, since they can easily synergize with their ultimates and supers, but for those who like to take a more melee approach, you're kinda shit out of luck, and you'll just end up acting like a bunch of hounds fighting over a piece of meat, essentially. Now let's talk about the story. The story is a variation of the first game. You still go around fixing the timeline of the Dragon Ball universe, making sure certain events happen, but the reasoning for why it's happening is a little different, and the stakes are much higher. So all the events of Xenoverse 1 happen, and that character is now labeled as a hero, while the new character is a student in the Time Patroller school, and eventually they're considered a prodigy, and they're requested by Trunks to take on a special mission, which is essentially take on Toa and Mira, villains from Dragon Ball Online, and keep them from trying to revive the Demon Realm, which is something that is Xenoverse 1 related. The scenario might be the same, but more things are different. There are more villains and more what-if scenarios in this version of the story than before, though there's not much that's going to be blowing your mind though. The main character for the story is your created character, with the previous one from the first game being hailed as a hero. You have a few more options at your disposal when creating your character, though there are no new options than when compared to the first game. It's more or less the same, only more variation for each category. Personally, I wish they would allow you to change your character's fighting style and or the aura for when you power up, but I guess the option to change ki blasts you can use is a step in the right direction for now. However, obtaining new attacks for your character is much more simpler than in the previous game. Gone are the RNG frustrations and the long master paths. With everything being said though, the only thing holding this game back is the difficulty settings. Enemies between 1 to at least 40 are completely pushovers and tend to make parallel quests boring. Arguably, you could say that it's there for new players, and that's fine, but just give the option to people to raise these difficulty settings, so at least make a huge chunk of those parallel quests viable and fun to play, because after you complete them once, you're essentially not going to do them again, unless they conveniently have this one item that you're seeking and you can never get it, which is very rare to happen. One of the best things that pull this game together is the difficulty. It's the enemies acting like Dragon Ball Z characters, practically perfectly blocking everything that you do, and seeming impossible to beat them at times, is what pulls this game together. Obviously, it doesn't have to be to an unfair level, but in comparison, a lot of the enemies are really easy to fight. If they can fix some of these issues we mentioned, then this game has the potential to be the best Dragon Ball game out, or maybe the third best to being the worst.